San Francisco, California, this is What's Left, a weekly political discussion challenging the mainstream left. I'm Eduardo Abarca with Andy Lipson. Today we will discuss the also headline-grabbing issue that is happening, and not because of Trump, but because of circumstances. It is the migrant camp from the Northern Triangle, Guatemala, El Salvador, y Honduras, to that have crossed the border into Mexico and are coming over to the border, the southern border of the USA. So that is what we'll be discussing, the migrant caravan.
Yeah, they're calling it the migrant caravan, although people, I think, are better seen as refugees, asylum seekers. So, yeah.
Right. They are asylum seekers, and I would consider them as refugees. Mm-hmm. What can we... All right, so on the 12th of October, more so, there was an organizing in San Pedro Sula, one of the cities I have traveled to. I've traveled to most of Central American countries, and I know the dire poverty levels and the circumstances firsthand. And there is...
And I think that city has the highest murder rate.
It's the murder capital in the world.
Yeah.
Okay. It is. So, the 12th of October, there was this organizing, and people locally organized because people have been migrating for years. Mm-hmm. This is not new. But this is the first time in a long time that these caravans, because they use the word themselves, it started off as a caravan, like a small caravan, a caravana, where they started, in the 12th of October, they started organizing massively together because they decided to go as a family, women, children, people who wanted to go as a group because it's safer to go. Mm-hmm. And many people, like I said, have been migrating, and they have migrated taking a train called La Bestia from Central America through Mexico and en route to the northern border of my country, Mexico. It's a very dangerous route, and there's documentaries, there's some even films that have been made. I will link to some that I think that people can watch. Because I think that if you get the cinema experience, you kind of have a feel for, like, not a complete first-hand experience, but you get a feel for, like, what goes through to traverse this route. Mm-hmm. And I know it is a very dangerous route. Even myself, having traveled through small furgonetas or like vans through all the cross points and checkpoints. It's just scary going through the borders because I didn't go through plane. I went just on taking vans. Mm-hmm. So I can imagine if it was scary for me, how it is traveling illegally around all these borders. And gangs are involved, stripping people of their money, their food, their resources, rapes, kidnaps,
and the people,
extortions.
These coyotes who take them across, are off. They'll. It's very expensive.
Yes.
And they'll lie. They'll just take their money and drop them off somewhere else, or, drop them off somewhere that's not very safe. So.
And the train itself is a scary thing to take on because if you fall off of any of these, people don't have limbs or they fall off, they die. Mm-hmm. Well, like I said, on 12th of October, I repeat, was this organizing, and there was a former legislator, left-wing legislator, that posted on his own Facebook feed, and then it got this big...
That was a Honduran legislator,
yes,
though.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it got this big attention. Mm-hmm. So there was originally 4,000, 5,000 people that decided to go together, and then it started dwindling as they went through. On the border of Guatemala and Honduras, there was a standoff with the police and the military, and it lasted for a few days, but they eventually broke in and they decided to continue en route, and they eventually reached what was that weekend that I had already spoken to when I had told you we had spoken to like 2 weeks ago, that I had posted something on my own Facebook about it when they had reached the Mexican border, and that is when I denounced on my own Facebook feed that I thought that it was incredulous how Mexican government was treating the Central Americans. Mm-hmm. They threw tear gas to families and children and you could see thousands of people on the Mexican border not being able to cross. And there's stunning images of this. And eventually the Mexican government got international pressure and sort of didn't want to look bad with the optics of all this. So they allowed them in. So they're on their way. And how has the US American reacted? Well, people are using them definitely for, especially on the right-wing side, for optics and scare tactics, for the midterm elections and ads and their campaigns. Trump has even said that there's Middle Eastern people in which the national security of my government of Mexico has finally confirmed and said there has been no Middle Eastern people within these migrant groups. And MS-13 as well, there aren't any MS-13. That is the reason why they're traveling in this group, because they don't want to be, they don't want to be isolated. They want to travel as a pack. So I think largely the Democrats, my point of view is that they have been silent on the issue. They do not want to.
They've been trying to avoid the issue.
Yeah, that's how I feel it. And that I've been waiting for some of the most popular Democrats to say, where is Kamala Harris in all of this? Where is Elizabeth Warren? You know, where is even Bernie Sanders? And they have largely been silenced. I did hear something Bernie Sanders did make us in, but it wasn't a full statement. He just keeps making these broad, he didn't speak specifically. He has said, like, we should accept everyone, we should accept all people of different backgrounds. But the issue here what is at current state is that these people are crossing, and we need to bring highlight to maybe the possibility that we need to open our borders to people. And we'll get into that. We'll get into our opinions. But I hope I gave the onset sort of like the intro to what is going on, to give context what we're going to be saying next. I am probably going to repeat myself a couple of times. I am very disappointed in the Mexican government, especially with Enrique Peña Nieto, who has demonized many of the migrants, but they have recently come under pressure and they are saying, okay, fine, stay here. Mexico, I would consider, if we're going to use any of these first, second world, third world country terms, Mexico is a second world country. It's not considered so much a third world country. People can argue with me about that, but I consider Mexico to be a resourceful country. The richest man used to be a Mexican, so so it's a very powerful country and nation. I'm sure they can take in as many migrants, but there has been negative media coverage as well in Mexico, which I'm deeply disappointed by. So, Andy.
Well, first, Honduras, Guatemala, Nicaragua, Central America is also an area of resources. And it's not that those areas don't have resources. It's just that those resources have been plundered by U.S. companies through the Central American Free Trade Agreement. Just as NAFTA has destroyed the Mexican economy and has destroyed the livelihoods of many people in Mexico, CAFTA, it's called, has done the same thing in that region.
For Central America.
For Central America, and is part of the understanding why it would be that essentially what these people signed on for, right, is a long journey through trains and walking, and I mean, this is pretty heroic what people are doing. It's pretty this is a huge hundreds of miles walking journey or traveling, and they are doing it because they're trying to. I think they're trying to get out of a very unsafe environment, and where they don't feel the opportunities are there any longer, and those opportunities have been simultaneously destroyed by policies pushed by their government and the U.S. government in conjunction with each other, really, around things like CAFTA and the U.S. war on drugs fits into this, and as well as the U.S. destabilizing that country through helping foment a coup in 2009 when the president they had elected, Manuel Zelaya, he was trying to make some changes in the line of people like Chavez, trying to do some things that would actually challenge the existing right-wing institutions and there's like 70% poverty in Honduras. So he was attempting to deal with some of that
in 2009.
In 2009, and the U.S. helped. The military wasn't going to have it. They wanted to have a coup. The general who led it was a general who was trained in what was called the School of Americas. Went there twice, and so the U.S. had a ready hand in trying to make that coup happen. Has destabilized that country since then, and has made it so the government is no longer trusted by the people at all.
You're referring to Juan Orlando Hernandez.
And is that the current president?
Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, I think the government, not just the president, the entire government is considered corrupt and part of like a military junta, largely. So since that coup, because I think people were very upset about the what happened there. Even though they have elections, I don't think people trust what government's being produced. And the U.S. has a direct role in both politically destabilizing the region as well as economically destabilizing the region for the benefit of the United States. So these people who are traveling in this caravan are doing it, I think, for reasons of safety. They're not trying to get in here illegally, as far as I understand. They're going to basically, as a group, come and make an asylum plea. So what they're promised basically is once they get to the border, they're really going to be held in a detention center as they get processed, and then they get, maybe if their asylum plea is allowed to go forward, then they'll be assigned a court date of some sort, and they'll get a bracelet or something like that. But basically, the U.S. government will expect them to show up at a court date later on. This is what these people are signing on for. So a long journey just so you can be held in a detention center is like, no, people don't just do that readily. So this U.S. has destroyed these countries, and now, as a result of that, now we have people who want to come in here and try to make a living, and both by virtue of the U.S. being the causing this crisis, but also just as a socialist, as a person who sees these as fellow workers who, just like a person might need to travel from San Francisco to Oakland to get a job, a person might need to travel from Honduras through Guatemala, through Mexico, to the United States to get a job. And I think the working class is an international class, so I think they have every right to do that, not just seeking asylum or refugee status. You should have just the right to come in here and make the living that you can, as best you can for your family. But I think that they probably had hoped, I wonder about this, because there's a question of the timing of it. I do wonder if they had hoped that in the context of the elections, that the Democrats and people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Bernie Sanders would have come to their aid, but that's not what's happening. And the Democrats are trying not to talk about this at all, and basically want to talk about mail bombs. And instead, they're making that. So that's how this is being used. Just if you remember, everyone was talking what a friend of the immigrant the Democrats were when they were talking about abolishing ICE. Well, now you really see what the friend of the immigrant is for the Democrats, when they don't want to talk about this because they feel like it's going to lose them the election. And so they're cowardly, the Democrats. These people who are making this trek are brave. The Democrats are the opposite. They're cowards. The Republicans, of course, equally cowards. And really, there are a bunch of criminals that are coming to our country, and they're about to be elected in 2000 on November 6th, and they're going to enter Washington, D.C. through the Democratic Party and Republican Party. And those are the criminals we should be worried about, because the people coming in across the border are actually our allies, they're fellow workers, and we have to understand them as such. So I'll start there, basically.
These people that are coming over are fleeing from violence, poverty, persecution. They're fleeing from the very things that people in the media portray these immigrants to be. People in Honduras, there is lots of gang violence, and I know from even in Mexico, where this also exists, but more so in a smaller country, and it's like a massive scale because it's a smaller country, it happens, whereas Mexico is such a larger country. This is happening where if people demand, these gangs demand for a certain percentage of businesses, recruit young people, extort people, and so the very people who are claiming that these people are coming to their country, that is what they are leaving. I have said this before in another video as well. They are leaving from those very same scary things. They want a better life for themselves, and that's what they're willing to put their lives on. they are bringing with them their children. And a lot of the times I see that people are thinking that I knew this was going to happen, that all those thousands were just going to come at the border. I knew that Mexico is a large country. The numbers are dwindling. The numbers are dwindling now to about 2,000, from 5,000 to 2,000. And I assure that at most, I am sure that they are going to continue dwindling, because people face all kinds of persecution even within Mexico. In Mexico, they're very discriminatory against Central Americans. On bus stops, I have been on many times on Mexican buses. I know Mexicans know this, on the southern side of Mexico, where you have to get, the soldiers come in and they check all your documents, and if you're if you don't have a proper documentation, they take you off. I myself didn't have my passport once, and they took me off, and I was I have dual citizenship. So they do try to take away your, they do try to make obstacles, ¿cómo se dice? Obstacles to try to make it harder for you to reach the northern border. I wanted to say something on what you had said, and that was 2009, when we had talked about the coup. It was part of the Democrat establishment that had accepted the newly elected president. When the Honduran people, they had tried the democratic process to elect Manuel Zelaya, who you had mentioned, and wanted a reform. It was more of a reformist change into their country. And a lot of the people just started getting disenchanted about the democratic process. People went and rioted in Honduras. The working class wanted a change in Honduras. And because of it, because these two left and right wing candidates, eventually Juan Orlando Hernandez just took on. It was a coup. He took on in 2009, forgot about the democratic process, named himself the president, and the USA government acknowledged him.
Under Obama,
under the Democratic,
and
yes.
Hillary Clinton, as Secretary of State, supported this. Well, she said she didn't, but in the back door they do.
Yes, and that it destabilized the country in itself, and that just shows how it's only for the U.S.-backed interest that you will get a supported candidate. You wonder why these caravans are happening. We forget history. We forget the context from which these things are happening. And that amounting with the overwhelming amount of violence, and like you had already mentioned, that the murder rate, the highest murder rate in the entire world, the capital is San Pedro Sula. It's all these reasons that are making people flee, and I don't know how to.
I'd also add that, look, with all this talk of building a wall and making it harder to get in here, right now, if I had heard, if I'm in Honduras and I hear that they're making it more and more difficult to get in, and I know there's this one opening around seeking asylum to do this, and that they're talking about even closing that down because they've already diminished the number of asylum seekers in the United States allowed in from 100,000 to about 30,000. If I knew that window was there, essentially this caravan is built by Trump and anti-immigrant policies of the United States. Because people are saying, okay, this is how I'm going to get in then, particularly because they're making it more and more dangerous, more and more difficult. So you have to figure out ways to do it and not be, essentially either murdered or raped along the way, and then make it so that you actually have a shot at getting in. And so I would do the same thing. It makes sense to me. It's a brutal trip, but what people are doing makes sense. And so this is not something that's just not thought out, and people aren't just making this up. This is people acting out of desperation, but it's desperation that is actually in part, I think the U.S.'s own policies of trying to keep people out and talking about building walls has actually made it even more likely that people are going to rush at this moment to get in before things get even harder. So that makes sense to me, at least.
And I would also say two more things about this. Many of the gangs that are in El Salvador and in Honduras were not created in those very countries.
MS-13 is a creation
Those
of
were
the United
created
States.
in the USA. They were bred in this country. Many of some subgroups of these gangs have also been created in Los Angeles, where a lot of the high poverty areas, because of lack of education, lots of kids who had been brought with their families. And if you have all these limited resources, and you had these people who did not have outlet to be able to give young people need to have some way to work, and not to work like physical, like to have a role in society. People want to have a role in society. We all want to have. And so they deported them. They just dumped them all into Central America. And even today, with all the new, I've also seen documentaries I will put in as well, that with the newly deportations that are happening, many of these former gangs that are changing their lives, who are being dumped back to the Central American countries, feel they have no choice. They have to go back into the gang to be able to survive.
Right.
And one other thing about the capitalist state, that this is the reason why the countries, all countries in general, and now we're talking about this Northern Triangle, but in all countries in general, will not be able to have enough jobs for everyone. You will not be able to survive. You're constantly on this mode of survival to be able to survive in a capitalistic country that does not favor the interest of the people, and that favor the interests of corporations, like we had with Cáceres, who was this woman who was working for the environment for indigenous people in Honduras, who was brutally assassinated in her own country, and because the oil companies and because of many corporations that are working in Central America to be able to take resources from the people. And when people try to push back and fight back, the US government, because these are many of the US government corporations coming to take and extract resources, then you have deals being made with government being complicit with these mafias,
right.
and murdering activists and murdering people. And Berta Cáceres, we should remember Berta Cáceres, who was an environmentalist fighting for indigenous people's rights in Honduras, and she was murdered. And that is another reason why people are fleeing, because even when they do try to cause change, because many people in Mexico have said they should put that energy, if they're willing to put their lives at stake, they should stay back in the country. I heard this from Mexicans in Spanish in my own Facebook feed when I've seen it. Mexicans have been criticized to say, if you're willing to put your lives, for your children, on stake, how do you call it?
Your life at stake?
Your life at stake, then go back to your country and change your world. Change your own country. They are trying to, and we have examples of that. And it's hypocritical for my own country to be saying that when we have ourselves, many of the times have done that, and we have such a corrupt government as well, which we're trying to flee as well, and we're treating the very people how they treat us Mexicans as well.
Right.
So it is just a lot to unpack.
I would say that
the
process that is driving people here is no different than what's going. I mean, well, it's different in scale, but it's the same. People talk about gentrification inside the United States, lack of jobs, housing getting too expensive. In some cases, it's not as safe for people. But all these lack of opportunities, so people relocate. People leave so they can find opportunities. That's all people are doing here. They're willing to go to these the lengths they're willing to go to, which is this long, crazy journey that's only going to culminate with them being put in a detention center for a period of time before they get hopefully released into the United States, is nothing short of miraculous that they're really willing to do it. It shows how desperate their situation is there. But no worker in the United States should whether you're from Mexico or not, no worker anywhere should say anything other than you are welcome. Bienvenidos, right?
Yes.
You are welcome here because you are a fellow worker. We trust you. Actually, statistics around criminality have shown that cities and states that have more people who are undocumented and more people who are immigrants, whether it was undocumented or legal, have lower crime rates. Actually, there was a Cato study that showed that. I mean, to me, this stuff doesn't matter. I'm just saying that all the stuff that they make about increased crime is a lie, because studies have actually shown that there's less crime in communities that have undocumented and documented immigrants than more. Like the real loss of manufacturing jobs isn't really about immigrants. It's about what technology has done to basically make it so that, you know, all these giant companies can produce a massive amounts of stuff with mostly robots and a few workers, and that's what's really happened is technology has basically made these things more efficient. So the loss of jobs is due to that efficiency. Capitalism just doing its thing has made it that way.
Which, like we have highlighted in another video,
Yeah.
that is not shouldn't be seen as a negative thing. I personally do not think that technology should be seen.
It isn't negative, but under capitalism, it is negative because it displaces
because
people. But it does do that thing. I mean, this is what Bruce was getting at, where capitalism socializes the productive process, but then privatizes all the profits and all the wealth of that, puts it into a few hands. If the profits were socialized, just like the production of it was socialized, we wouldn't have this mess, and people would actually welcome the technology because it's like it would make their lives easier. Look, if you're concerned about this issue, and if you're looking at what's happening here and are outraged at how these people are being treated by the Republicans and how Democrats are being silent about it, and you should be, there's only one attitude to have about this, which is we should welcome these people with open arms. Welcome them as fellow workers who also are trying to make a living, who are also trying to make their life. And this is the only, like, this question of solving the riddle of capitalism ripping up each country, of our country playing its role to rip up their country, and as well as immiserating the lives of people in this country by lack of health care, poor education. If we want to solve that riddle, that riddle is not solved within national boundaries. It is solved internationally. And the working class is an international class. So the only attitude for anybody who in any way thinks of themselves as trying to change the world to seeing these people come towards our country is to say, you are welcome to come here, not just as asylum seekers, not just as refugees, but most foremost as workers, as fellow workers. We'll find a place for you here, and we will have to together figure out how we're going to overturn this system ultimately. And any social, like, if Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez call themselves socialists, but also condemn people who talk about open borders, well, they're not socialists. You cannot be a socialist and not be for open borders. I don't mean letting in asylum seekers. I mean open borders. Like, come in, anybody who wants to come in whenever. And this whole thing about whether a person have been vetted for having terrorists in there. Look, the biggest terrorist is the United States, and all these folks, like all the folks who've been doing the terror, the U.S. has connections with them. They know who these people are, or what they call terror. So this is just a boogeyman that the U.S. is trying to build. And if you fall for that one about there might be people who are Muslims trying to, like, that's just craziness, you know. And I don't know. I'll just leave it at that.
I think that the scare tactics that under especially Jeff Sessions trying to deter the immigrants is inhumane as well, to try to scare people by taking away people's children, which still, where are the parents that are the children, because where are the missing parents for many of the children that have been court ordered to reunite with their families, which we're still waiting for. And I think that asylum seekers should not be limited to what we define it to be, to think. There's lots of people that are refugees, lots of people that are migrating that should be considered refugees because they are running away from things that you sometimes cannot prove when you have the government being complicit in many of the crimes that you're trying to run away from. And I think that, like you had said, I feel like we're being a little broken record here with you, but we should welcome everyone. We should welcome all people of all races, all nationalities, and we forget our history from where we came from, because this country is founded on immigrants. Everyone is an immigrant, really, and even our DNA testing that everything is coming as a trending, we'll find that we're really a big melting pot of races. I know that I have like percentages of Irish in me that I didn't even think I'd have. So it's just like we are not really all one pure race in the world. We are different people, and it comes down to why we do not want immigrants to come here, because they are different from the majority. I think really people are afraid of that because people are brainwashed into thinking that. But the economic pressures, you have to have a scapegoat to put blame on people.
This is a.
So they feed into it and they play it using the race card to be able to do that.
They are using racism to scapegoat a group of people coming in from Central America. The number of people in 2016, the number of people who came into this country from Honduras was the same as who came here from Great Britain. Same number. Okay, I don't think those numbers have changed dramatically. So and 5,000 is a drop in the bucket in terms of the total churn of people coming both into the country and leaving the country. These people's plight is being used as a political expedient to one scapegoat immigrants and people coming from South America, in particular in Central America, as a problem when clearly the problem is like the establishment and Donald Trump, the Republicans, the Democrats, all of them are complicit in basically immiserating us, and they want to be able to direct it to somebody else. The notion that capital should be able to move freely across borders, but people should not, is completely inverted. Like for us, for workers, we have to say no. We don't let capital move freely. We let people move freely. And that has to be our attitude on this question. I think it's not just that Jeff Sessions who is trying to build fear into immigrants. It is also like anyone who's talking about a process, a pathway for legalization. Anyone who's not for open borders has to accept in some ways. No, you can come in, but you can't. And once you do that, once you accept this notion of borders, then you accept the notion that you have to put fear and restrictions into somebody who's on the other side of that border. And we can't do that. Like we actually undermine our own cause when we do that, because again, the working class is an international class. It requires bonds being built across these borders. So we have to basically welcome workers and see them as having the same rights as us, the same abilities as us, more potential abilities, and welcome them as such. Because if we don't, then we will never ever figure out. We're never ever going to have the kind of change we need to have, which needs to be a working class socialist revolution. If you're a socialist and don't believe in and don't advocate for open borders, then you're not a socialist. I don't know what you are. You're just a person who actually is trying to figure out a different way of keeping capitalism intact and also keeping immigrants out. And that's the situation of Bernie Sanders. That's the situation of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and that's the situation of any of you who say that you're a revolutionary. If you're not for open borders, then you're not for the kind of revolutionary change that you say you advocate for.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, there are some things in there that it's not that I disagree. As I think that you should expand. Well, you have in other videos, but yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if there's anyone you want to say, I'll.
Well, you're saying that even people that are people calling for a process of illegalization are.
Right.
What term?
Because what I mean is that they're accepting the notion that we should have a border that should be defended, and that people have to wait on a queue and decide, and we get to decide. Okay, you're in, you're not in. Well, the you're not in. That in order to keep the people we don't want in, we're going to have to use some sort of threat to basically say you can't come here, and if you do try to come here, you are not here legally. Therefore, we either deport you or put you in jail. So you're going to be forced to use some sort of law. And the only way you can make it so you don't give the state the right to punish workers trying to cross borders is you take away the border. That's the only way to keep the state from doing that. You have to take the border away and just basically say, no, come on in. I'll go to your country, you come to my country. You, as a fellow worker, have the right to locate anywhere you want. And if my country happens to rip your country to shreds and make it so that it's untenable to live there, you definitely have the right to come over here. And that's really the situation that's happened. I mean, I'm not saying that I'm glad my country did. I mean, I'm not supporting my country doing that. I'm just saying, I'm just acknowledging that that's what my country did. So I certainly have no basis for keeping anyone out on that basis. But that's not my basis for wanting open borders. My basis for wanting open borders is it's the only way. It's the only way we're ever going to see an actual. It's one of the ways we're going to build unity within the working class internationally is by welcoming each other across these borders and fighting our own governments when they try to stop people from doing this kind of stuff. And again, we're not just fighting Trump, we're fighting the Democratic Party. But Trump's in power, he's the person actually being aggressive, so we got to stop him. But when the Democrats get here, they're going to do the same stuff.
And Republican campaigns using the wrong images of immigrants. They're using Moroccan immigrant images representing Honduran immigrants, which I think...
Well, but again, I'll say that Moroccan immigrants are welcome as well.
Of course. I'm just saying, you see how, people want to try
they're going to use racism and ignorance to push it against people.
Uh-huh. Well, anything else you want to say?
I think that's it. I would just say I hope people who are doing this, I hope they get in, and I hope they get what they want, which is be able to establish a life for themselves and their families. And to me, this just shows the bankruptcy of our political system, the fact that one political party is going to try to use these people's plight to get elected, and another political party is going to try to get elected by ignoring it. And it just to me proves that between the two parties, there's nothing to choose from.
Mm-hmm. And one other thing I wanted to mention was Trump threatening these countries to take away their aid from them. What aid have you given but military aid to these countries to support them? I was looking for this aid. What aid is he referring to? And I was searching, but I only can find military aid. U.S.-backed military
to
aid
fight
to
the drug
support
wars,
these countries.
Stuff like that.
So I don't know what aid is he referring to.
Has AMLO spoken on this?
I cannot verify that. Yeah, I cannot. I do not know.
All right.
Yeah, I should look for something. We'll say it in the next video.
Yeah.
Or I'll post a link on it. Or right here we'll have the.
Yeah.
If he has or not on the YouTube video for audio listeners, if you want to know.
Do you know? I read this. I'm going to actually find this. I read this thing that the slogan for this march was. Have you heard this? I thought this was interesting. What it said that the slogan of the march was "Migrants are not criminals. We are international workers." Is that true?
Yes.
Like the people are saying that?
Internacionales, yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Well, I agree with them. So.
Well, people have said this when they get interviewed by the media on their route over to the northern border of Mexico. They will ask them, "What is your purpose? What are you attending? What do you want?" And they'll say, "We want to work."
Yeah. Yeah.
They have said this, that we just want to work. Yeah. We want what is best for our children. We want to have opportunities of education. We want to live in peace without having to be extorted, without having to fear walking down the corner. So yeah, they have. Yeah. Anything else? Did you read from that report?
No, I just didn't know that was a slogan. I thought it was very appropriate, and I think it's the best way of summarizing the way any of us should look at this, which is these are not criminals. These are international workers. These are our brothers and sisters coming to our country, asking for help and just a chance to live their lives. And we should do nothing other than welcome that. That's how we treat each other going from state to state. It's also how we should treat workers who are coming across from different countries.
Yeah. Right.
Next week, do you have an idea?
Well, I'm wondering what date is it, because I want to do the midterm elections video / podcast.
Prior to the elections or post elections?
Prior.
What would be? I agree. What kind of would we be talking about prior to the elections?
I don't know. Maybe you're right. Which would be best, prior or post?
Okay. Well, maybe we'll do something
we can think about
before. If you can think of an angle on it.
Either way, on this half of the video that is belonging to me, I will endorse voting.
I would be for voting for some propositions, but there's no candidates to vote for.
I think that there
Maybe we
is
should talk
more
about
to
that.
voting.
We'll talk about
But
that, maybe.
I do want to encourage everyone to go out and vote. I'm just to be a part of the democratic process that is some residue of this democratic process. I think that wherever we can, try to grassroots organizations working on behalf of social issues and candidates that are, some of them are quite good, I like, but I will not endorse here. But you can visit my Facebook page that I will link to. And I will also just say, whoever you want to vote for, that is your position, but you should really vote. I think everyone should just vote. I think it's something that should be. I'm appalled that in Georgia they pulled over a bus with black voters like this was the 1950s, but it has been a right that people have been fighting for in history of this country. So I think that we should I will encourage people to vote. So
I will encourage us to talk about elections next week. We'll do that. He just got this. He just threw it down a little bit here, so we'll talk about it next week. All right. So I think we got a topic.
Please share with folks. Please rate, review, subscribe, and share with folks. We are on iTunes, podcasts, Google Play, YouTube as What's Left, BitChute, which is an alternative, and Stitcher on those 5 mediums. And again, rate, review, subscribe, and share with all. Thank you very much.
We'll see you next week.
All right, ciao.
All right, bye-bye.